Hi there. We're going to take a quick look at Nintex's support and compatibility with Microsoft Lists, the new Lists app within Office 365. Microsoft Lists, if you're new to it, it gives you the ability to track information, configure lists, organize events, issues, track things, assets, so on and so forth. Share with your teams, share within Microsoft Teams, and we'll look at how we can automate it with Nintex. Concept of list isn't entirely new. If you've been around the SharePoint traps for a while, you'll know exactly what a list is and what a list does. So we'll have a look at what we can do with it in the Nintex space. So first thing we're going to have to do is create a list. Now I'm in Office 365 here. I'm going to pop down to my Lists app and we're going to open that up. A couple of things I can do. I can create a new list. I can go from a recent list. I can look at my lists. What I'll do here is add a new list. You'll see in the options, you've got a few different things that you can do with lists. Create a blank list, import a list from Excel, an existing list that already exists, or from a template. We'll go with a blank list and I'll call this my assets list. This is a list of, oh gosh, this is a tongue twister. This is a list of assets within the organization and their condition. Now it is freaking out because it's a US based tenant and that's not how we spell organization in the US. I like this blue color. Let's list of assets and I'll save it to my Crisco Office 365 site and we'll show that in the nav. So create the list. It's going to create a pretty blank list and this is where the first interaction with Nintex comes in. So you'll see, as you probably know if you're an Office 365 or existing SharePoint on-prem customer, workflow and forms for that list is the embedded app. So you're able to create a form front end for the list within Office 365 and you are able to create a workflow to automate the information within the list. Now what I'll do here is add another column. I'm going to add a column, simple single line of text, and call it condition. That's the condition of the app and I'm going to save it. Now I'm going to keep this list open because what I'm now going to do is create a Nintex Workflow Cloud workflow for it. So I'm in Nintex Workflow Cloud. Let's go back to the top level. What I've already got is a connection to that underlying Office 365 site, which is here, NTXT02. And that is just done through connections and SharePoint Online. So this is my one down here. Don't need to edit that, don't need to add a new one. This is my connection to that whole Office 365 tenant. And when we create a workflow, I'm going to be able to do a few things with that list. Now what I'm going to do here is quickly copy the site URL because I'm going to need that for later on. Blank canvas workflow. Now, first things first, I'm actually going to be able to create a workflow that starts from an event happening in my assets list. So go to my SharePoint Online, start event, and my event could be a new item, a new list item, or a new or update to a list item. So I'll say when a new item gets created, maybe I want to review that particular asset before it comes in. So SharePoint site URL is here. Just paste that one in, select the tick, and I should see my assets list listed below. There we go. So now what I can do is actually start this workflow in condition, but essentially the new event is going to pass an object into the workflow, which is all the information from that asset. So if I'm starting it from here, a new item, it's going to push that information up to Nintex Workflow Cloud. And I can do all sorts of things with that. I could potentially assign a task in here based on the approval of the task. I might want to create a document for that list, maybe a report on the particular asset condition as it's been returned, and then maybe I can get that document signed as an example, and if I want to, possibly store that file as it's come back from Adobe Sign, Nintex Sign, into OneDrive as an example. So just taking from that list event and pushing it through. But what if I don't want to start on a new item in the list? What if I want to start with something a little bit more data capture, a little bit more friendly than the list-based new item? I can change that to a form. So I can actually design a form front end for the lists, which not only is going to work authenticated for people in my tenancy, but also I can make this public anonymous if I need to. So if it's something like a self-service returns capability where I'm sort of putting some sort of asset back and then saying the condition that I left it in, uploading some imagery, so on and so forth, I could do that way. Or I can have my new form authenticated, design the form. So let's say for my asset list, I've got title, that might be an actual ID, and I've got condition that it is returned in. So what I could say is maybe we scan a barcode here, which is actually going to be my asset ID, and potentially have a choice control for my condition. So we could say this is my condition, and let's say good, the bad, and the ugly is my condition that gets returned. Let's make that horizontal. Could add something like a signature panel to prove that it's been returned, maybe as part of that, so on and so forth. So we'll apply changes to that. The only other thing that we want to do is actually push that information into that list. So I'm going to go with create an item. Pop that action in there, create the item. Connection is already created, as we said. The site URL is that one there. Retrieve lists. So I should see my assets list created. There we go. It's going to allow me to add fields. Now, any of the fields that I've added as columns are going to appear. As we add more, they're going to appear in the drop-down. I've got two, title and condition. Let's add those in. So title is actually my asset ID. I want to pass that barcode when I scan it or punch in the number. And then my condition is going to be my condition, which is my form choice control. Now, the result is a variable that comes back. I'm not going to need that because I'm not going to continue on the workflow, but if I was continuing the workflow, I'd probably want to know the ID of the item that's come back in. So let's publish that workflow. Let's give the workflow a name. So we'll call it Microsoft List Demo. Publish. Workflow is going to save, workflow is going to publish. It's going to pop up with the URL for the form. Now, if we'd gone with the public anonymous, we'd have a public anonymous URL. Pop up in that form. Let's fill this in. So let's say the asset ID is 123. And on a mobile, that would obviously be the barcode scanner icon. It's in ugly condition. If we want to sign on glass, now I haven't map those up to anything, so that signature is not going to appear. Submit the form. Form submitted successfully. Jump up to my list, and let's just wait for that to refresh. So my asset 123 has appeared in ugly condition. That's come from an Nintex Workflow Cloud form, and that has been pushed into lists. So what about the other way around? We've seen how Nintex workflow and forms can create an item into a Microsoft list. But what if we want to use Microsoft lists as my reference point? Let's have a quick look. So we'll create, first of all, a data source to my assets list that I've already created, just to make life a little bit easier. So we'll add a new data source, give the data source a name. So this can be my asset list. Description, well, just to make life easy, a list of assets. The connector, I'll use SharePoint Online. The operation is going to just be the one. It's going to be query a list. Connection, SharePoint Online, that's a connection that I've already created to this SharePoint Online environment. So we'll just pop that URL in there, grab that, and copy. The list name, once I select the tick, should appear. There we go. Which columns do I want to bring back? So if I select the columns, they'll be used. If I don't select any, then I'll be able to select all of them. So I'm actually going to select, I'm going to leave it blank. and I can create the data source or save that data source. Okay, so what happens if I want to create a form that has a lookup to this Microsoft list here? So we'll create a workflow, and this could be a public anonymous form, external form, which I will create. So that will be supported. So the ability to look up lists from a form that isn't necessarily inside of your domain on your Office 365 tenant. So we're going to go anyone with the form URL as an example. And what I want to do is select data lookup. It's going to be a really simple form here. So data lookup, I'll configure that control. Choose a data source. Here is my asset list. Which column do I want to return? And I think I do have a title column in there. Let's just add an item limit. Any conditions would come back. Select my option label, my option value, give it a name. Got all my other options here, so it's going to work with rules. It's going to be read-only if you want to, required if you need to, so on and so forth. Now if I apply those changes, let's just preview. There's my asset. I'll just go back, apply the changes. Don't really want to do anything else, just show and tell. Let's just log this one to history as an example. Pop that start event control in as the log, publish my workflow, give it a name, lists data lookup demo, publish that. I'm in an incognito window already, but I could obviously open something else. So what I'll do is I'll copy the URL and I'll open up Edge, for example, and paste that form in. And there is my control looking up the asset information in my Microsoft lists as part of that integration with Nintex and Microsoft lists. So, does Nintex support Microsoft lists and is it compatible? As we've seen, absolutely. Enjoy.